January 2026, 03 hours. The city of Caracas is sleeping under a blanket of humidity and silence. To the casual observer, it's just another night in the capital. The streetlights flicker in the barrios. The guards at Fuerte Tiuna are checking their phones, bored, complacent. They think they are safe. They think the mountains of El Avila are an impenetrable wall. They think the Caribbean Sea is too far away for the Americans to launch a surprise attack without triggering the radar net. They were wrong. Because while they were watching the coast, looking for Navy ships, something else was already inside the wire. Something that doesn't arrive on a boat. Something that had been walking among them for weeks. Watching, listening, waiting. When the news broke that Nicolás Maduro was in U.S. custody, drinking coffee in an interrogation room in Florida instead of giving his morning address, the world gasped. But inside the Pentagon, the shock wasn't that it happened. It was who pulled the trigger. Everyone expected the Tridents, the rockstars, SEAL Team 6, the men who got bin Laden. But the Trident never came out of the holster. Instead, the mission went to the Ghosts, the unit. 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta. Why? Why did the US military sideline its most famous warriors for the most high-profile capture of the decade? The answer isn't simple. It involves a Navy admiral checking his ego at the door, a geography that made maritime ops a suicide run, and a fundamental difference in DNA between a hammer and a scalpel. Tonight, we aren't just telling you what happened. We are dissecting the brutal logic of Tier 1 selection. We're going inside the mind of JSOC to understand why, sometimes, being the best killer makes you the wrong man for the job. Welcome to the deep end. To understand this operation, you have to look at the man at the top of the pyramid, the commander of USOCOM, United States Special Operations Command, Admiral Frank Bradley. A man with a trident on his chest, a SEAL through and through. Now put yourself in his shoes. You have the mission of the century on your desk, the capture of a foreign head of state. This is the kind of mission that defines a military branch for the next 20 years. It secures budgets, it secures recruitment, it secures glory. The temptation to give this to his own boys, to his SEAL brothers, must have been overwhelming. It would have been the crown jewel in the Navy's history. But Bradley didn't do that. And this is where the lesson in elite professionalism begins. Bradley looked at the chessboard. He saw the variables, he saw the risks, and he made the call that likely angered a lot of his friends in Virginia Beach. He handed the ball to the Army. Why? Because at that level, you don't play favorites, you play to win. Bradley knew that the specific skill set required to snatch a paranoid dictator from a dense, mountainous urban center wasn't about direct action. It wasn't about kicking in doors and shooting fast. It was about unconventional warfare. It was about patience. He knew that if he sent the SEALs, and it turned into a firefight, the mission fails. If Maduro dies, the mission fails. If the extraction chopper gets shot down because the pilots aren't used to scraping their rotors against skyscrapers, the mission fails. So, the SEAL Admiral chose the Army specialists. That single decision proves that inside JSOC, the mission always outranks the tribe. It was the ultimate check-your-ego moment. But to really get why the Army was the better fit, we have to talk about how these men are made. Because a SEAL and a Delta operator might both be Tier 1, but they are different species entirely. Mainstream media treats special forces like they're all the same. They're not. The difference starts at selection. The Navy SEALs are forged in the surf. Hell Week is about shared suffering. It's about grit. It's about locking arms with your boat crew and refusing to quit while the freezing ocean tries to kill you. The culture it creates is one of brotherhood, aggression, and overwhelming violence of action. Their motto might as well be, find a way or make one, preferably with explosives. They are the hammer. When you need a target destroyed now, amidst chaos, you send the SEALs. They are the best shock troopers in human history. But Delta? Delta is different. Delta's selection is called the long walk. It's not about screaming instructors or boat crews. It's about being alone. You are in the mountains of West Virginia, carrying a rucksack that weighs as much as a person, navigating point to point with a map and a compass in total silence. No one is cheering you on. No one is yelling at you. It's just you and your mind fighting the urge to quit. This creates a different kind of operator. The SEAL is a pack animal. The Delta operator is a solitary predator who can work in a team. Delta recruits heavily from the Green Berets, which means many of them already speak a second language. They understand culture. They understand how to blend in. The concept of the gray man, someone who can stand in a crowded room and be completely invisible, is the core of their doctrine. In Caracas, you didn't need a hammer. You needed a ghost. You needed operators who could infiltrate the city weeks in advance. Guys who could grow a beard, put on civilian clothes, drive a beat-up Toyota Corolla through the barrios, and rent an apartment down the street from the target without raising suspicion. That is tradecraft. That is the world of espionage mixed with commando tactics. And while SEAL Team 6 has made strides in this area, Black Squadron, it is practically a religion for Delta Force. They didn't just assault the target. They hunted him. They lived in his environment. They watched his pattern of life. A SEAL platoon stands out. A Delta cell disappears. That invisibility was the key to getting close enough to grab him without starting World War. Third, this isn't the first time the US has played this game. If you look at the history books, there is a clear precedent for dictator hunting. Panama, Operation Just Cause, the target, Manuel Noriega, who went into the Modelo prison to rescue Kurt Muse. Delta Force, Operation Acid Gambit, who hunted Noriega down until he surrendered at the Vatican Embassy. The Army, Iraq, Operation Red Dawn, the target, Saddam Hussein. The Navy was there, sure, but the unit that pulled the Ace of Spades out of that spider hole in Ad-Dar, that was a Delta squadron working with the Rangers. Why does this keep happening? Because capturing a high-value target, HVT, alive, is a logistical nightmare that requires ground loitering. Ground loitering means staying in enemy territory for a long time. It means setting up observation posts, OPs, in abandoned buildings, and watching the target for days. It means eating MREs and peeing in bottles while staring through a spotting scope, waiting for that one. Mistake. SEALs are raiders. They hit the target and they leave. Their operational tempo is fast. In, kill, out. Delta is an occupation force. They get in, they set up shop, and they don't leave until the job is done. For Maduro, the requirement was capture alive. This is crucial. If they killed him, he becomes a martyr for the revolution. The region explodes. The White House needed him in handcuffs. Delta's history with hostage rescue, remember, they were formed specifically for that mission, makes them the masters of snatch and grab. Controlling a non-compliant subject, moving him through a fatal funnel, and keeping him breathing while the whole city is trying to kill you. That is the PhD level of CQB, close quarters battle. The SEALs, let's be honest, have a reputation for leaving bodies behind. The canoeing scandals, the aggressive nature of their raids. Sometimes the target doesn't survive the breach. The Pentagon couldn't risk an accidental execution. They needed the surgical precision of the unit. Now let's talk about the battlefield itself, because amateurs talk tactics, but professionals talk logistics and terrain. Caracas is a fortress. It sits in a valley at nearly 3,000 feet, 900 meters of elevation. To the north, you have the massive wall of the Alavala National Park. Mountains that rise up like a shield, cutting the city off from the Caribbean Sea. This geography killed the Navy option. SEALs need water. Their best insertion platforms are submarines or fast boats. But you can't drive a submarine up a mountain. To use the SEALs here, you would have to fly them in from a carrier sitting miles offshore, over a mountain range that is bristling with Russian-made radar systems. The flight profile was a nightmare. And that brings us to the getaway drivers, the 160th SOAR, the Night Stalkers. The relationship between Delta and the 160th is like a marriage. They train together constantly at Fort Campbell and Fort Liberty. They have developed specific flight profiles for urban warfare, flying Little Bird helicopters between skyscrapers, using the buildings themselves to mask their radar signature. Caracas is a concrete canyon. To get in undetected, you need pilots who can fly 10 feet off the rooftops at 100 knots in pitch-black darkness. You need the street fighter tactic. While DEVGRU works with the 160th, Delta lives with them. The trust required to fast rope onto a dictator's balcony in the middle of a hostile capital requires a telepathic level of coordination. The planners looked at the map. No water access meant no boats. High altitude meant difficult helicopter performance. Dense urban terrain meant high risk of ambush. The equation was simple. This is a land operation, and the Army owns the land. There is one final piece to this puzzle: the war for the budget. For the last 15 years, the Navy SEALs have been the face of the US military. The Bin Laden raid made them global celebrities. Movies, books, video games. The Trident brand is worth billions in recruitment and public support. The Army, specifically Delta, has always been the quiet brother. No books, no movies. Quiet professionals. But inside the Pentagon, relevance equals dollars. When budget season comes around, the branch that is winning the war gets the funding. By handing this mission to Delta and having it succeed so flawlessly, the pendulum swings back to the Army. This operation reminds the world, and the Senate, Appropriations Committee, that when the stakes are highest, when the job is impossible, the Army is still the premier land force on the planet. Admiral Bradley knew this. He knew he was handing a PR victory to the rival branch, but he did it anyway. And that is the story of Operation Absolute Resolve. It wasn't about who was tougher. It wasn't about who had better PR. It was about matching the right tool to the right problem. The SEALs are the hammer. But for Maduro, Uncle Sam needed a scalpel, and they cut him out of Venezuela without leaving a scar. In the end, Maduro is in a cell, and the Delta operators are back in North Carolina, training for the next one. They won't get a movie. They won't do interviews on Joe Rogan, and they wouldn't have it any other way. But I want to hear from you. Do you think the SEALs could have pulled this off? Or was the gray man approach the only way to get into Caracas? Let me know in the comments below.